Hi, Ragaia.
Hello.
How
Nice
are
to
you?
see you,
I am
Karen.
so excited to see you today.
Thank you. Thank you very much for the opportunity to meet with you today. Appreciate that.
Yeah, you look fantastic. So, for people on
Thank you.
Instagram and Facebook, I want to welcome Ragaia. He is the director and founder of Blue Sage Ayurvedic Sanctuary up in it's outside of Grass Valley in Nevada City, right, Ragaia?
Yeah, yeah. Outer limits of Nevada City. Yep.
It is the most beautiful sanctuary I can attest to because I've been there several times.
Thank
And
you.
so, you guys and ladies out there, the reason why I wanted Ragaia to join today is not only because he's a certified Ayurvedic specialist, he's also a former master teacher at the California College of Ayurveda and director of body therapies there. But I have known him now for probably almost like 15 or 17 years. When I was on my own healing
Yep.
journey, um, back in the early 2000s, that's when I met Ragaia for my
Yeah.
own Panchakarma. Um, and I have known him, we've evolved the relationship ever since. And he actually is a former panelist on the Women's Health panel. For those of you who follow us and have been to the in-person panels here in the Bay Area, Ragaia spoke at the October 2019 panel, along with medical practitioners, Western medical practitioners, and acupuncture. So I am a big proponent of whole body health, and that is why I wanted Ragaia to join us, because I feel like in the midst of the above and beyond stressors that women are facing today, all
Mm.
people are facing with COVID and shelter in place and BLM, there's a lot going on. And so I wanted Ragaia to share with you his perspectives on some of the core competencies of Ayurveda and how it can help a woman, since this is carry on of the Women's Health panel, help women navigate this. So Ragaia, I thought we could jump right in
Okay.
to kind of the first question and just talk about what I know. When you and I were speaking, you were talking about the three pillars of Ayurveda.
Mm.
What can you
Mhm.
share with the audience? What's the first pillar?
Yeah. Well, I wanted to take a moment first to just expound on that. I've actually expanded the way in which we refer to that in my own practice a little bit, and you might have in the past heard typically what you'll hear as the three pillars are food, sex, and sleep. I've kind of amended that just a little bit to include a little bit more, and I refer to it as like the three S's, which is sustenance, sex, and sleep. So just think of the three S's. And when we first talk about food as it's seen through Ayurvedic, lens, so to speak, we're mostly evaluating what it is we're eating, how we eat what we're eat, and basically how we do with that process of eating, like in terms of digestion. And the quality of digestion is very important because then that gives rise to a healthy body, obviously. So there's a lot of focus in Ayurveda about the quality of food and once again, the practice of eating food in a mindful and balanced way, I guess you could say, without going into all the details on that right now. And then the quality that we get as a result of eating in that way. So that's the first thing. Now, sustenance includes a heck of a lot more than just the intake of food, because we also look at what sustains us emotionally, right? What sustains us spiritually. And especially at a time like this, we would definitely take note of the fact that some of those things can be challenged. Now, everyone's accustomed to eating every day, so that's probably one of our most familiar things. But in a time like where we find ourselves in the last few months, our interactions socially, what we might be doing spiritually, those things might have been moved around a bit. And so, more than ever, I would like to just make a comment on a lot of people are probably really palpating the value of having that or not having that interaction, even with just themselves. So, um, well-being, like health and well-being, like again, what I was saying under sustenance is definitely firstly on the food realm. And I think that's the part that people can respond to the most and they relate to the most. However, I do want to talk about emotional sustenance as well. And that can have to do with the quality of your relationships and as well as the quality of how you feel kind of within your own realm from a day-to-day life standpoint, right? So, and the third thing within sustenance would once again be spiritual, not having, for example, time or having time for yourself to be spacious and to reflect is actually the foundational place of eventually creating maybe a meditative practice, a yoga practice, um, even the things that people talk about a lot these days, like we might say meditation, but if you're a more active mind, you have an active lifestyle, you might actually start with what we'd call like a walking meditation. Like for example, when you go out on walks with your dog, right? So on one hand, you're you're in your joy, like being with your dog, but also that relationship sets up a time and space where you get to kind of be in a very unique way and interact with the world in a way. And that has a very sustaining quality. That's a nurturing quality as a habit. So that's um, that's how I would like to talk for a moment more about sustenance. So let's go back to food for a second. So the food aspect of it is if things are going well in your body and you're digesting well, then you have good energy. And as a result, you have good functionality, right? Your tissues work, your heart is beating, your elimination is good. And that's all good. And we basically don't put any attention on it when things go well, right? We usually just gets our attention when something's not going well. We call those things symptoms of imbalance. However, when a symptom imbalance does arise from an Ayurvedic perspective, we're looking at what's happening that gives us an indication that digestive strength is challenged. And so there's this idea of cellular waste or toxicity, digestive waste in an Ayurveda. It's called ama. But in general, let's just say you don't feel so well. You don't have great energy. Maybe you're not sleeping well. Maybe your sex drive has been affected. Maybe you've noticed other things happening digestively, like upset, heartburn, things like that. Those are all symptoms that the food digestive level of things are just not going super well. So one thing I wanted to say in frame, in terms of everything we'll talk about today is this is the value of when you feel drawn to a practitioner. These are the places where they can toe in with you sort of on your health team and help you to understand those symptoms so that you could navigate with ease and grace and kind of learn strategies and techniques instead of reaching right away for a symptom alleviation, which would be like in the case of, say, acid indigestion, going for, I don't know, like a Tagament or some sort of antacid kind of medication. Okay. On the emotional side of things, when things are going well in your life and you have healthy, quote, healthy relationships, you just feel good, right? You just feel happy with that. And, you get nice how time connecting with people and you get good feedback with that, et cetera, et cetera. But I think when things are not smooth emotionally, we tend to feel those more significant emotions that people talk about, like sadness, grief, oftentimes anger, resentment, intensity, etc. And those with time also become a place of imbalance in the sense that your emotions are not necessarily being fully processed or what we would say digested, assimilated. And as all of us in terms of in practice go on, we're starting to see more and more the relationship between undigested emotions and the disturbance in the nervous system and specifically the endocrine system. So a lot of times in the past, I would reference other physicians in the past, like Dr. Bruce Lipton, for example, who's made a very strong point of understanding like the biology of belief is what he calls it, and that it relates to a whole area we call somatic psychology, where we've come to understand that undigested emotional states become literally part of our body's structure and our tissue. And this can be a kind of redirected energy that doesn't digest and assimilate and process properly. And then it affects the flow of those organs. And like I was going to emphasize, the digestive and the emotional through the endocrine system. So that might be a.
Oh yeah, no, I'm so happy you brought up Bruce Lipton because undigested emotions can be toxic. I really am a big believer, especially as a cancer survivor, because I think a lot of my cancer was due to undigested emotions and not staying true to the self. And so yeah, I'm so happy you brought that up. And can you go a little bit deeper into how the undigested emotions could even impact the gut and like it going back to kind of your first pillar,
Yeah.
Ayurveda.
Yeah. So, okay, if we just take the food section of that and you were to say, okay, one of the things that Western medicine also confirms is that if that constitution has a tendency to feel more disturbed by, say, heated or frustrated, intense emotions, and in Ayurveda, we would call those are the more fiery emotions. Those are like the pitta, the fiery emotions. One's GI tract would become aggravated ultimately by that. And if that symptom that you're receiving was the symptom of, say, loose bowels, diarrhea, anxiety having to do with whether it's functions that you're doing at your job or things that are happening in your relationship, etc., that will directly oftentimes affect the digestive tract. That may come up as those symptoms. And this is one of the actually diagnosed conditions called IBS. So IBS literally means irritable bowel syndrome, meaning that something is taking place on a regular basis, usually, that's kind of caustically irritating the bowels to basically release that internal heat that's building up. So we're right now focusing on more of that fiery kind of types of emotions. And what the body's doing in kind of like to serve you is to say, I need to release this heat. So it uses the bowels to liquidate and let go. But the result is you have the symptom of diarrhea or something like that, some sort of nervosa kind of diarrhea. And you'll notice that when you remove the anxiety or the tension or the intensity, the symptom tends to abate. But what happens is the body is so incredibly adept at adopting to behavior and patterns that it starts to anticipatorily create just that real time with you. So as soon as you feel like something's going to be stressful, the symptoms, even pre-symptoms of that, start to build. And then you might even find your behavior changing with time because you're like, oh my gosh, I don't want to do that because I know it's going to create an episode of what have you, diarrhea, et cetera, in my body. But that information, those symptoms, is basically your body throwing a flag on the field, as we say, telling you something very important. It's saying this on some level is aggravating you. So if you can start working with what the cause of that aggravation is and how to better manage it, those symptoms will ultimately abate and your body will once again realign itself and resolve. So that's one thing that Ayurveda and most elemental paradigms like to look at the roots in that respect and resolve things right from the get-go.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's one of the reasons I am a big proponent of just Ayurvedic thinking and living in my life, because I
Mm-hmm.
feel like it's very preventative in its philosophy, as well as a lot of the Eastern modalities. It's really noticing the symptoms and being body conscious, body aware all the time. And just, it's not like we have to solve that and beat ourselves up if we don't get it right the first time, but just
Exactly.
increasing that awareness can really help us live healthier lives. So
Exactly.
what about going into the second pillar, Ragaia? What's the second pillar?
Well, the second pillar is definitely one of the pillars that people love to focus on. It is known as just sex. But sex is really just sort of like the peak of what this second pillar is really about. It's really about creativity. It's about who are we in the world? How do we express ourselves? And of course, once again, there's that which you are and how you create and so on in the self. Who is the self, that creative being? And who is that self as he or she develops in the world, right? So sex is definitely an aspect of creativity. It is one of the primary ways in which people, perpetuate themselves through the act of creating family. However, creativity is going to manifest in many different ways. And one of the things I wanted to talk about today, especially since probably most of our audience are women, is that oftentimes at a younger age, a woman will make a decision like, am I feeling drawn toward family life and creating children? Or do I want to pursue a life that is pursuing career and different areas of service and so on that also manifest creativity? And what I want to basically say by that is whichever you choose, you're still birthing something. Because especially in the case of women, women biologically are wired to create and they're wired to birth creation,
I
point
love
blank.
that. I love that.
Yeah. And so the thing becomes, as we're growing up, and societies continue to evolve as a mass society as well. So how that particular woman grows up in the context of society in her time will have a lot of bearing on what she may or may not see as the options for creativity and what feels like the best things to be drawn to. And I know that oftentimes, both, personally through my own client work and also just friends and so on, that oftentimes there's situations where in the younger years, you might feel drawn as a woman to a career, and then you decide you want to have a child. And that's when we start really looking, right, specifically at like, where's the hormonal level and what age and things like that. And that's a very specific thing to look at in terms of making the decision to have family later in life. However, in the beginning, it's really just about how are we manifesting that creativeness. And what I like to focus on is right now, I think one of the biggest things that women work with, and in my practice, I've seen this over many years, is there's a lot of drive to be a part of the doing in the world. And as we know, for the most part, this sort of patriarchal model that we've been living by in the last couple of thousand years, so it's not like yesterday, it's been a big yesterday, in the last couple of thousand years has been driven by a very significant push to be more in the accomplishing, doing. And I would say the industrial age was really the peak manifestation of what it meant to like apply these principles in the world and really show up in this massive materialistic kind of way of doing, right? And since then, we've been in a kind of evolution since that time as to, well, how do we do and enjoy our lives? How do we do, so the mechanics are starting to kind of come closer and closer together with the emotional and the spiritual side of wanting to enjoy it a little bit. And now we're peaking where especially the voice of women and the intuitive and the creative is starting to really emerge in the last 100 years. And now we're like, I think we're really peaking, especially with what's going on today, because space is being created to really sit back and wire and rewire and feel into things in a way that we really haven't created the time and space to do on our own. It's almost like you could say the period we're in right now is a collective symptom, the same way the body individually throws a symptom and says, hey, take a look at this, because I'm not feeling so good over here. What's this all about? And in that sense, I would say on a collective level, society's been in this to-do phase for so long that it's time to start looking at how do we shift from to-doing to being. And I think the female constitution alone, without even looking at the individual personalities, is really situated on being, because when you're really, really like in the state of being, all that is intuitive and creative and expressive is much more free to emerge. It's just like, you look at like how the simple things in life every day, if you witness how a plant is just in its perfect prime state of being and it hits that morning light hits it, you put a little nourishment on it, it just keeps blossoming and growing and expressing. We're very much like that. And I want to say both men and women are like that, but right now we're focusing on women. And the thing is that with women, in that kind of environment where there's a focus on what it means to allow being to emerge, where you can feel safe and comfortable and supported to do so, beautiful things will emerge from that. And a lot of the challenges that we're seeing in the to-do world currently are really being basically facilitated by the fact that a woman's wiring is not necessarily as situated for that do, drive, that the more masculine wiring is situated for. So what's happening and has been happening is the female's constitution has to compensate and bring up all of these much more masculine qualities in herself to make it so. And so that does create some imbalances. Now, I can't comment on everyone right now. I mean, I'm just generalizing, because some women are very wired for that and some are less wired for that, just like men. But when that happens as a collective trend, we tend to see certain imbalances on hormonal things being pushed and pulled that normally, if they were allowed to be more free and natural in that way, we probably wouldn't see to that degree. So this is an interesting thing, and I know I have to step carefully talking about these things because everyone feels, they want to make their choices, in which we all should feel free to make the choices. I'm just saying biologically, that will constitution to constitution, meaning individual to individual, play itself out very differently. So as a collective, what I would like to see is that we find ways to co-create and choose, especially on behalf of the female collective, to be more free and supported, to allow that creative juice to move forward, and what I basically call just learning in our lives to be more juicy, to just be allowed to just let that juiciness of our creativity emerge and put our attention more and more on those things. It doesn't mean we're not going to be productive. You know, it doesn't mean that we're not going to get stuff done. We can get stuff done and be just juicy all day. I mean, and just beautiful stuff. I mean, I think about like what you're doing these days, Karen. I mean, this whole beautiful line you've created is all about supporting women to like enjoy caring for themselves, enjoy supporting themselves with natural herbal products, basically loving on themselves in a way that reminds them that they have a body, it's beautiful, take care of it, ground, nourish, and that allows you more self-confidence and empowerment to show up in the world, right? I mean, it's beautiful. Congratulations. I'm so
Oh,
happy to see.
well, Ragaia, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Very, very kind of you. But you know, the last segment you just spoke on actually almost brought tears to my eyes, and actually I can feel my heart opening very big.
Mm,
Primarily, I want to address what you brought up because it hit home. As you know, much of my life was in corporate America, and it was go, 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 do, do, do. I had and still have a very successful corporate part of me, but I did learn very, very fast, especially when I was diagnosed with ovarian cancer, which is not an easy diagnosis. Um,
right.
I believe that the feminine, and I love the way you described it as the creativity, because corporate America is very male dominant. It is very oriented to do, 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 which is
Right.
not our innate way of being as a woman. We're creative. We need spaciousness. And even in the work I do today with business agility outside my passion, of course, you know, my passion is women's health and my products. Um,
Absolutely.
and bettering self-care for women, especially those who are in corporate America that need it more than ever. But even for my teams at work, I say, let's focus on being, not doing. And I say the only way you can
Mm,
achieve more and be more agile is to be. Doing agile does nothing. If you say I've
yeah.
done this and I've done this and I've done that, that means nothing to me. Teams that succeed in my minds are the ones that bring the feminine, and it can be, you know, the men can bring it too, but giving the spaciousness for creativity, because if you do, you forget and you don't see the big picture. And I also
Yeah.
loved how you talked about the collective we. It reminds me of Thomas Hubel and his
Mm,
work
mm,
on the collective we. And I mean, my God, you could speak for an hour on that last topic.
yeah.
Um, but I think it's very important that you acknowledged the differences innately, and how I loved your verbiage on women are meant to birth something, right? Whether it's creativity in her own work or her own passion, or whether it's actually birthing a child. That's what our Constitution
Yeah.
is meant for. So thank you for sharing that.
Absolutely.
Before we move on to pillar three, because I know we're hitting time pretty soon, but do you have anything else you want to say on pillar two before we move on to pillar three?
Well, I just wanted to close on that by saying it really is all about being. And you also capped on that. And so that what that would mean and close for the moment is, what could you do to shift that within your own awareness, right? What could you do? Because anything that we do for a long period of time sort of sets up an entrainment. We would call it an entrainment, which creates habits. So say, for example, a person's 50 years old and they grew up in a society where these are the general ideas and the things that have been held up for so long. It's not like you can just snap your fingers and change it on a dime. So what really seems to be helping with what it means to shift between just do and what it means to be would be like create little habits and little segue things that start helping you appreciate the space between things. You know, a lot of times if someone, for example, has a very busy mind, very busy day they run and so on, and they're like, but I need to meditate for 20 minutes. You know, you're like, it's almost like, I remember when I used to live in the Bay Area too, I'd be like, everyone's like jumping in their cars to race across town to meditate or to go to a yoga class. And I used to think, oh my gosh, how oxymoronic is that? It's like, we're
Yes.
all have done it, right? And you're like, I'm stressing out in traffic because I'm late for meditating. And after a while, you know, the words of people like Thich Nhat Hanh and Pema Chodron start ambulating in my mind. I think, okay, just start where you are. Just
Yeah.
settle down. Just go walk under that tree or go to your little space in your where you work or whatever and just sit down, take a breath, start learning to be a little bit more. I'll give Pema Chodron the credit on this one. She created this term gapacious.
Hmm.
Learn where the gaps are, create gapaciousness, and just get okay with that. Like get right with that, so to speak. And getting right with those little things and where you can have your spaces and things where you start to realize that that pressure you're feeling is really much more self-generated than you realized. And it's when the things happen in the world and you're like, okay, I've got to do this, then you can come at it with a little bit more space and say, okay, I'm going to put my attention on this now and I can accomplish this. But I can also do it in a way where I can be more calm. I can be more situated. I can be focused, but I don't have to be a crazy person with a to-do list with 20 things and be so anxious. Because what's happening over time is a heated state is building up inside of that constitution that's running like that. And again, I think Karen, you and I can both relate to this. We understand in principle that if we're going to run our attention like that and the heat starts building up, it will have its effects in time. Those can come out in many different ways. But in maybe another podcast that we do sometime, I'd like to talk specifically about fire quality and heat and accumulation of heat and what that can become in terms of phenomena in the body. But for today, I would just like to say that gap that you create, that space between things, is actually something that can help cool the flames of the intensity of day-to-day life. So
Hmm.
for number 2, we'll just pause right there for a moment just to kind of
Well, and yeah, and God, there's so much on two, right? Because it is in the true Ayurvedic sense, it's sexuality. So let's close on that peak, right? So if you create that spaciousness in your life, like you're talking about, and
yeah,
honor creativity,
yeah,
and that natural state of what a woman is meant
okay,
to
yeah.
be, how does that end with that peak in like improving the relationships and the sex and all of that?
Right. Well, that's a very good point, and you're right. I will do my best to sum that in a couple of minutes. But essentially, if as the woman, so you're going to like project and take the woman's perspective for a minute, if she feels spacious and kind of allowing oneself to do some self-care and so on, and kind of shift out of that to doing mine, then the natural energy that is more juicy and is more receptive as well as active, because it's both an active and a receptive principle, then the ability for sexuality to emerge, the ability for reciprocity to be encouraged and invited becomes stronger. Because when you are, as a woman, tapped out in the to-do part of the world in your life, you're not going to feel super juicy. You're not going to feel super open to sexuality. You might not even be open to any level of sexuality. And we're talking about both with self, with other, etc. It's like it just starts to shut down because if you haven't created this space for it to exist, it becomes just like we say about muscle memory. You're activating something in your awareness, something in your body, then there's a place and a space for it. But if you don't allow that space, then the chance of that happening is so slight and slim. And psychologically, emotionally, this is the component that starts to come in. We might with time start to feel like, hey, what's wrong with me? I don't have any sexual quality in my life. Or um, I have these expectations and nothing seems to be lining up. And so therefore, like it's an angst. It's like, oh, I want to avoid that category because it's just not happening. So forget about it, like whatever. But it's really probably not what it's about at all. It's about having this space to just allow and without expectation what it has to look like. And I noticed that with working with clients, and a lot is that sometimes there's an expectation, well, I want this perfect partner to emerge. Well, one of the things that we work on a lot is, well, what's happening in you right now that would allow for a perfect partner to emerge? Like, how could you feel more yummy and more nourished and more like ready for that? And then the universe will conspire to make it so. It's like dropping a pin or a little vibe, a light goes off and the moths start flying toward it because they're like, ooh, yummy, I want to be a part of that. And if a couple of people, a couple of moths that are looking for the light come to each other and they both are doing their work to like be yummy and stuff, then it's a beautiful thing, and that's kind of talking about the alchemy of the more sexual creative energy, like emerging. And then then you could say all the way from what you're doing in your life, what we would call the service of your life, and you're creating or not creating family, creating or not creating career, creating or not creating sexual relationship. These are all options, but the chance of them being supported is much greater if we pay attention and give space for that opportunity to emerge. That's the basic point.
Oh my gosh, I love that. Okay, so I actually have to say something about another
Hmm.
woman that I did an IG live with, and she was at the October Women's Health panel in the audience on the left. She's been at every health panel. Her name is Dr. Liz Dobbins, and she talks about the juiciness of life and women and spaciousness. And you guys, I mean, you've met probably behind the scenes at one of the women's health panels, but
Hmm.
just I can't wait for you guys to collaborate. Maybe I'll have you on the same panel because you could go
That'd be fun.
back and forth about the
That'll be fun.
spaciousness. And because her whole goal is for all, she believes all women are born to thrive and they deserve, brilliant sexual lives. And she wants to create that spaciousness in women's lives for them and teach them how
Right.
to do it through self-care and just actually being in an energy rich space all the time.
Mm.
So
Mm.
I love, love, love. Thank you for sharing pillar 2. That was deep and great. So let's move on to pillar 3.
Okay.
What do you have on pillar 3 for us?
Pillar 3. So again, generally we'd call it sleep. And I want to expand that out a little bit. So sleep, rest, rejuvenation, these are all aspects of this zone. And a lot of times I know when I'm working with clients, there's a lot of focus put on how did you sleep? And in a way, in our society right now, with so many things leaning in and all that you're doing and stuff, oftentimes that ability to sleep becomes disturbed, unfortunately. And one of the quickest ways toward craziness in our lives is to disturb sleep. And they've done a lot of sleep studies. I've been reading about a lot of sleep studies the last couple of years, and I've noticed that the disturbance of sleep will start to set up both biochemical, like in general, hormonal imbalances, really rocks the endocrine system. And the primary reason for that is, like most people have heard, the function between in our central nervous system, we have the sympathetic and the parasympathetic function. Now, sympathetic is just commonly known as fight or flight, meaning activity, this thing we just talked about activity. So the being, the doing, we have no shortage of sympathetic function in our society. What we have a shortage of is that parasympathetic side of things, because that's again, we call it the rest and digest aspect of our nervous system. And the rest and digest zone is getting smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller because the amount of doing, the amount of distractions, the amount of things that draw our attention outward are quite large. So when you see, as I do in practice, oftentimes insomnia, sleep disturbances are really big on people's concerns, their symptoms of concern. So I've put a lot of value on not just the quality of sleep. I might not go right into the whole sympathetic, parasympathetic right away, but we need to understand that our systems are wired in a way to actually need both of those states in order to rejuvenate itself. And that's why in the sleep category, I put in there the category of rejuvenation, because that's really the crucial thing that we're doing when we are in the rest and the sleep, the deeper sleep states. Our body's having the time. So this is where our body basically gets capacious, right? It says, okay, thank you. Let's shut down all that doing stuff for a little while so I can like repair the liver, so I can kind of circulate and then store blood, so I can detox the colon. And all of that has to happen in order for you to rise and shine the next day and feel like, yay, new day. And when that starts to like get compromised, it starts like, oh, okay, another day, where's my espresso? It's kind of like, then like something is not rejuvenating as fully as it could. So I've been really focusing the last several years with my clients on, okay, let's talk about sleep and where that's at this moment. But let's also talk about how many places in your daily life do you have little moments where you recognize that there's like a little respite? Like, is there a little break here and there? Is there a way that you can put your attention on something else for a few minutes at least that gives you that chance? I mean, in this respect, we could say that the practices of whether you're drawn to more physical activities or, when I say practices, I mean, it could be like you could be a runner and that could be relaxing and meditative. But see, that's still in the doing. You mean you're really working your body. So I know that that can be relaxing, what it's like to be in the zone. I used to be a long distance runner, so I'm just gonna pull back from that for a moment. I know you have too, so you know what I'm talking about. But let's talk now about the things that really cultivate actual stillness, not just some of the pullback that happens in the mind. So when the body has a chance, like say the time you allow yourself around meals, if you really say, okay, like in Ayurveda, we talk about these principles around guidelines for healthy eating. And that allows us the ability to really be with, am I taking the time to shift activities and just sit and have a meal? Can I take a couple of breaths and relax my system so I could really fully receive? Can I actually chew my food so that I'm breaking it down to a consistency my digestion could actually break down? And so on and so forth. All of these things are super important. We go through people as practicing. And the whole reason is why? Well, ultimately, so that if you take the time and energy to eat and you're doing it in a restful way, your body will get the most energy out of it. So you could say you get your greatest ROI, so to speak, from taking in food that you're going to actually process, have some energy, a little bit of storage, and then when the system's working properly, you eliminate what you don't need. And actually across every system of our body, every bodily system goes through a similar thing. We take something in, whether it's an impression or an actual food thing. Then we have to have the capacity to digest it. And then we have to have the ability to assimilate what we can. And then we eliminate what we don't need. And when that's going well on all these different levels each day, we just feel better. So sleep is no different. If we go into the sleep time with the intention of sleeping and resting, and it somehow gets disturbed, whether it be the active mind of the day, fixation on certain mental ideas, to-dos, etc., stress in general, stressful jobs, etc., that doesn't allow us to decompress smoothly, that sleep becomes disturbed and it does not allow the body to reboot, and things will start to accumulate, creating diseased states or uneasy states. And that eventually will go into what we call like disease phenomena. And a lot of times I don't think enough people recognize that just disturbing the sleep chronically will itself set up certain patterns in that direction. So when we practice with people and we see sleep disorders, we do take that pretty seriously. We want to start setting a new baseline for what would it be like to start creating even spaces during your waking day where you give yourself a little time, for example, to have the meal and not feel stressed. When you get home at the end of the day, what kind of decompression strategies do you have? For some people, decompression means being in the car and just listening to their favorite music or listening to a book on tape or a podcast, and then getting home and having like a ritual around maybe making some food or feeding your pet or having a couple, something to drink or something that just relaxes your system. So it's really important to have little landmarks in your day that are your go-tos to help calm the energy and allow you to feel more at home in your body and in your own process, your daily habits. So that's one of the things I definitely want to focus on about sleep. Just feeling at home in your body is going to be one of the greatest ways that you can help set up a new pattern. If your attention is so outward, then when it comes time to lay your body down, your mind is so active and it doesn't even know where it is. You know, it's kind of like, where do I rest this? You know, how do I ground it? You know, a lot of us use the word grounding a lot. And I know one of the things that we talked about in the past was with this whole shelter in place and quarantine things going on, more people than ever have been more in their home environments. They have been in their own rooms and stuff more than ever. So this has been a great opportunity in that respect to rest more, or at least have the opportunity to rest. On the other hand, there's a lot of stressful things happening and a lot of unknowns, so that it's not like we're on some permanent vacation. So that's not exactly comforting. But we do have the opportunity to say, okay, well, I do have this situation. So what could I do to feel more settled with what I can be settled with? And to take advantage of having a little more rest, doing some of the activities I'd really like to do. In other words, also just putting my house in order. I mean, how many people out there have actually taken the time to probably organize and reorganize their house cleaning?
So many things. Yeah, I have friends who are interior designers, and I'm like, your business is going to thrive through COVID.
Booming.
Because everyone's looking at their house in a new way. And I love how you're bringing the physical home into the home of our body and the shell
Exactly.
that we walk around in. And it's time to cleanse both, right? And this brings me to a point, and I know we're running on time, Ragaia, but when we were speaking the other day, just on that cleanse topic of how important it is to clean the house before actually tonifying, can we go
Absolutely.
into that just for a minute? Because that goes along with the sleep, and then we can kind
It
of
does.
close out. But let's talk
It
about
does.
that, the importance of,
Yeah.
because some people just think, oh, I'm gonna do a cleanse, and
Right.
they abuse the body. Remember the first time I met you, I had
Yeah.
gone and done all this astringent type of stuff and just juiced, and that's not what my body needed.
Yeah. So a lot of people are drawn to this idea of cleansing because something will come up in your life and you'll realize, oh, maybe I could try this diet, or maybe I could do this every morning, or maybe I could do this big bowel cleanse, what have you. And the idea of cleansing might be intuitive and it might be spot on, but how to do it and the right timing could be very critical in basically receiving the best cleanse for your body and also obviously the best benefits. So it's hard to say, but sometimes cleansing wrong time, wrong place could actually be more disruptive initially than beneficial, right? So on one hand, what I do in practice is all about like structuring programs so that people can see the benefit of what does it mean to sort of clean house before you start rebuilding tissue. So that's where we're going to go in a second. So I want to focus on different types of cleanses could be appropriate for different people in different times. But in general, right now, we're going to focus on a program that I run a lot, which is called Panchakarma, which just simply means it's going to work with all levels of the tissue in the body, from mind, body, spirit, and just fully encompass the entire being and walk it through a process. Now, even in your case, when you did those Panchakarmas in the past, you realized that there were certain things you even did at home to prepare for that. So the actual process can be much more comprehensive, and then there's certain things you might do that are key with a practitioner. And I like, your question is spot on, because being drawn to it is just part of it, and then understanding in principle, what is it about, how may I do this for myself in a way that I'm going to get the best benefit, right? So let's go with the analogy of cleaning house. So say, for example, you look around your room and you're like, gosh, I'm kind of tired of that chair over there. And that's got a bunch of dust on it. And that vase is broken. I should replace it. Da, da, da. Well, before you go running off to Scandinavian Design or IKEA or whatever and buying a bunch of stuff and bringing it home, imagine when you do that, you come back with all these boxes and you start setting up furniture and stuff. And first of all, where are you going to put the stuff? And secondly, now you have all this clean stuff and now you have all this dirty stuff. So it looks confusing, right? It's like basically now you have a bigger mess. That's a lot of times what it can look like, to just drop a cleanse on your body without even like going, hey, knock on the door, body, would you like to do a cleanse? First ask yourself, is this a good idea right now? Okay, yes. Okay, I feel the message. I got the message. But the next part is, what do I need to do? So what you would do with, applying yourself, you say, okay, maybe I take some of that stuff out of that room. Maybe I vacuum and knock off the dust bunnies and, start high, work low, get everything out of there. Then go shopping. Going shopping in this case would be like, what practitioning or what style, what program would I like to work with to address the thing I most want to improve? And that might be hormonal function. That might be digestion. That might be sleep cycle. I can guarantee you they're all related, but
Yeah.
wherever you toe in, that might be your way of going, oh, that got my attention, bling, bling, bling. So you go over there, you're like, okay, that got my attention. I want to balance my hormones. Balance my hormones, balance my life. And I want to thank Claudia Welsh for creating such a beautiful book. I would say, please, thank you, Karen. Please go to this book and Dr. Claudia Welsh, who's also been a great teacher over the years. And she's written this beautiful book about what it means to understand your body, which I'm going to go to next in closing. And then how to grok, like, what is this whole thing about balancing my hormones through food and lifestyle and process of emotional balancing, etc. But just to kind of complete
Guy,
here.
before you end, I just gotta flash it because this is speaker. It flashes to who's speaking. So for those,
Gotcha.
Ragaia, I got this book from Ragaia probably 12 or 14 years
Yeah,
ago. Balance
it's a
Your
great
Hormones.
book.
It's a great book.
Great book.
Okay, go ahead,
So
Ragaia. Let's close out. Closing comments.
we
What
will.
kind of tip?
Well, basically what I was going to say is you get the idea. It's like you want to clean house and you want to be like preparing the body in a way that could really receive the most benefits of whatever cleanse that you're drawn to. And then I always recommend, like, seek out a practitioner that can help give you good guidance on that, because they're going to help you with preparing your body and probably pre-steps and things that you might not have otherwise known. And once you've done several cleanses or things, then you become more adept at it, like anything else, and you'll be able to prepare yourself. And many of them you can do at home. But if you're doing something more elaborate, more comprehensive, you might go to a place that kind of walks you through the process each day. And that's what we do here at the sanctuary. So what I have seen time and time again is that the effects of a really good cleanse can be profound and life-changing, like resets. We call Panchakarma, for example, like a great reset. It gives you the opportunity to have a new baseline and reset digestive function, reset a lot of the neurological activity and functions, reset hormonal things. So these are very profound, and they happen as a result of basically creating the space to make it so. Once again, we come back to that gapaciousness, that gapaciousness, that creating the space. And what ends up happening is when you get more subtle and you slow down and you put your attention fully on the body, what ends up happening is you become more and more curious about that. And that's where I really wanted to, like, one of the concluding things I wanted to share with you today is, if we can do things in our lives that allow us to lean more and more and more into what it means to be curious about who we are as physical beings, spiritual beings, emotional beings, we become a little bit more available to allow that to come through. I mean, many of us have heard that expression, like, take the time to ask the question and the answer will arrive, right? It's the same thing. And there's lots of references, like kind of that build it and they will come thing, right? Remember Field of Dreams, like build it and they will come. Many of us have just really grokked that over the years. And it's like that. You create an opportunity and something will emerge if you give it space and time. And that requires patience. So patience, and the other P word, perseverance, with that patience allows for something new to emerge. And with that curiosity, the one thing I wanted to focus on is, especially for women who are, wanting to understand more about their symptoms and wanting to understand more about how these different things relate, and how can I get the alleviation if I want to take this herbal product, or if I want to eat differently, and how can that affect my balance and my moods and all of that. Well, first of all, you have to genuinely want that for yourself. It's like, if you genuinely want that and don't just want symptomatic relief, then something starts to shift within you. You actually start to feel more committed to understanding more about the depth of your being. Like, how does this body work? Like, what is all this talk about? Like, maybe I learn more about, well, my liver's here. Everyone knows basically about where their heart is, because we have a lot of things that have to do with the heart, and we put our hands on our chest. This is where my heart is. But all of our organs are super important. All of our functions are super important. And one thing I remember learning when I was younger and really always drawn toward the physical body and health and healing was, I knew that anatomically I had to kind of do my work to learn about the physiology and the anatomy of the body in order to be to speak cogently about it, and to also like navigate it myself. I've been a very physical person my whole life, and I've had my share of injuries and stuff. And you notice that when you have an injury or a procedure, all of a sudden you become curious, right? You're like, what is that about? And I mean, I have clients show up that will literally read me their reports from the hospitals and stuff, and all of a sudden they're a specialist on certain things, because that's when you become actually genuinely interested. You're super curious. What would happen if we became curious before there was a problem? What would happen if we just were so aware that our bodies was such an amazing gift, just to be in that gratitude that we came into life, we have a body, and no matter where it is, start where you are. Start where you are with the gift of your body. It's not that it's broken or amazing or not amazing or whatever. It's your body. It's a gift from nature. And you can start exactly where you are. And you can experience health, wellness, and well-being from this moment forward. And it's all about how you feel about it, how you think about it, how you interact with it. And what Ayurveda does really beautifully is it continues to show you day to day different strategies and ideas and methodologies to work more and more toward being at peace and being at home in your own body through the basics. And those are the three pillars that we focused on today. Just what it means to eat well and take in rejuvenation on all levels. What does it mean to rest What does it mean to have activity? Like, all of these levels are about living a whole life. And by doing that more and more consciously and participating more and more actively, we allow amazing life force to sort of bloom through us. Oh, that was beautiful. Did you hear that bird?
Well, I've had a hummingbird go back and forth around me, but yeah, it's
That was
beautiful here in
beautiful.
the garden, and I'm so happy. And God, Ragaia, what a beautiful way to end this interview, because Ayurveda really is about whole body healing and acceptance and meeting yourself where you're at and coming home to
Yeah,
yourself. And see that I've got nature all around me.
yeah,
And it's one of the things, I mean, you and I have known each other a long time, but remember, I was even considering studying Ayurveda. I loved it so much
yeah,
after I was introduced to it in India in 1998, because unlike a lot of Western prescriptive modalities, Ayurveda says you can have everything. Just do this in moderation, do a little bit of this, more of that. It doesn't say you can't have that. It really looks
exactly.
at an individual's constitution and says, okay, your Vata Pitta, maybe in the summertime, eat a little less heat. In the wintertime, have a little bit more oil and unctuousness. So I love, love, love it. And I'm so
Mm,
grateful that you came and shared your perspective today with everyone. I can't
thank
wait
you.
to post this on Instagram. I can't wait to put it on Facebook. Um, and so Blue Sage is open, right? And that, you know, for the audience, what I love about Blue Sage Sanctuary is not only is it, I don't know how many acres you're on, but it's
20,
very, very private. 12? You're on 12
20.
acres? 20. It's private. So Ragaia built this gorgeous, gorgeous home, and he and his assistants, one lives upstairs, and then I think some come in from the college, but he takes on a client at a time, and they have their own little private apartment that is adjoining to a treatment room. So literally you're in 4 hours of treatment a day, or whatever he deems is, you know, you negotiate what you're there to do, and Ragaia and his team walk you through it, but it's private. I mean, I remember sitting
Very
out at the
private.
pond contemplating after 4 hours of treatment, and I would just read books or meditate, and it is such a literal aloneness. It is so Pima Chandran. You have to get very close to the thoughts coming in and out, because
Yeah,
it's deep,
because
deep
you're with
healing.
them.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it's deep healing.
yep,
But thank you
yeah.
so much. So Blue Sage, so anything people should know during COVID? I know you always take amazing precautions.
Yeah, we're following the same protocol that everyone else is, and so there's that. And we go through a whole protocol of connecting with you online and on the phone before your meeting, and you have to do some things at home. And I mean, the place, the way we run our practice is already technically sheltered in place. Like you said, it's very isolated, and we've been that way since the very beginning, because that's the way we've been here for 16 years. So it's kind of like it was nothing new on that level. But you know, you run through some protocols and you follow that, and it's all good. And as things evolve, I'm sure we're going to see a lot of new things that are going to be applying in that way, even the way all of us shop every day and every other interaction we have in daily life. So we're going to all go through some sort of evolutionary process, and hopefully we all come out the better for it, and we've learned something. However, at this point, our main focus continues to be health and wellness, and now is as good a time as any to like really put our attention on such a thing. And like you've so beautifully outlined, I mean, this entire place is situated exactly for that purpose. And that's why I myself moved here from the Bay Area years ago, to create an opportunity for people to have that kind of immersion. And that's why we call this sanctuary. It's more of an immersion experience. So thank you so much, Karen. I appreciate everything that you shared and the amazing questions. I hope I didn't expound too much and go off on too many little trails, but I really love sharing with you, and I love the opportunity to share with all of your amazing peeps out there, and hope you have a beautiful day. Thank you so much.
Oh, I'm so grateful. Thank you. And I hope you have a wonderful time, and we'll see you soon. And hopefully, you know, if the next women's health panel is
Mm,
big group online, that then so be it. But in the
so be
meantime,
it.
I'm loving doing these ad hoc interviews. So thank you for your time. And I loved everything you had to say. So thanks for
Okay.
sharing with everyone.
Thank you.
All right.
All right.
Stay
All right.
peaceful.
Namaste. Thank you.
Okay. Bye,
Be well.
Ragaia.
Bye-bye.